welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and another dip into the archive. So it seems simple really. What's a theme park? Well, is this one? And this? This falls under the idea which Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart put forth in 1964. I know it when I see it. The justice was writing about a less family-friendly subject, but it still works. Basically, it means that the term theme park might just be subject to subjectivity, so to speak. Still, I know that certain terms are helpful to connect similar things as long as I don't get too stuck in the weeds of a definition. Theme park is one of those. My definition may not help anyone but myself. Still, if I'm going to talk about the history of Florida theme parks, it's best to start with the question, what the heck is a theme park? And that's what this video is about, Florida's theme parks. For me, there are 3 criteria for a theme park. Each of them must be fulfilled. Of course, this is presupposing I'm talking about tourist attractions. The first criteria is that the attraction must be park-like. Take this typical city park with walkways, grassy areas, and gardens and expand upon that. A go-kart track isn't that type of park. Neither is a museum. The second criteria is that the attraction must have some sort of theme. It must tell a story beyond its basic reason for being an attraction. A botanical garden is a good example. As wonderful as they are, gardens are almost always just a collection of plants. That's not really a theme, that's more of a type. Botanical garden, mini golf course, museum, etc. The third criteria is that it have a significant number of attractions including rides, live shows, movies, and museum-like experiences, which are themed as well. So that's it. A theme park must be a park, have a theme, and have themed attractions. And yes, the devil's in the details. So let's start with an attraction with which everyone is familiar, the Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. Opening in 1971, along with 2 hotels, it was and still is essentially a copy of Disneyland in California. Most experts call Disneyland the first modern theme park, and I use the word modern in this context to illustrate that Disneyland was a significant step forward in the concept of theme parks. Yes, there were many elements borrowed from other attractions, but what they built was like taking inspiration from a 1920s biplane and building a jet airliner. Anyway, the Magic Kingdom was Florida's first modern theme park. It's park-like in appearance and contains many themed attractions. It had multiple themes, and that's the first complication here. They're called theme parks, not themes parks. Still, a long-held tradition in Florida tourism is that you never have too much of a good thing, so there's no need to get hung up on that. Most everyone knows the famous Disney lands: Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, Liberty Square Land, and the one people seem to forget, Main Street USA. Yes, that's very much a theme. It's a fantasy interpretation of an early 20th century town. Now, diving into the timeline, I need to go back a bit to talk about a couple attractions which came before Disney. People refer to them as theme parks, and I want to explore how well they fit the definition. The first is Six Gun Territory, one of my favorite parks. I made a video about it that includes how its memory is still honored in Williston by a number of its former employees.
Wow, it looks as if those outlaws got it right here in Six Gun. Caller. Here's Colorado, back for revenge along with his men.
Six Gun Territory had the theme of a Wild West frontier town in the tradition of classic movies and TV shows. It was park-like if you squinted a bit and looked past all the dusty roads. And it had a number of attractions, though this is where it falls a bit short in the theme park definition. Six Gun did have themed shows, shootouts in front of the jail, can-can girls dancing in the saloon, and meet and greets with TV and movie stars. And it also had rides, as you can see here. Though with the exception of the train that took guests from the parking lot to the entrance, the rides weren't integrated into the theme. They were in a separate section and were basic fare rides. Six Gun, which opened in 1963, bought what was available at the time. In contrast, Disney created their own rides, but in Disneyland's first years, Frontierland didn't have anything fancy. You'd visit a small Davy Crockett museum and ride on a mule train, in a stagecoach, on a narrow-gauge mine train, on a keelboat, and even paddle a war canoe. So not fancy, but they were themed and added to the atmosphere. While Frontierland was heavily themed, the ride area of Six Gun wasn't. We next head south to Dania to visit the short-lived attraction Pirates World. It opened in 1967, and as you can probably guess, it was a pirate-themed attraction. Unlike Six Gun, I never visited Pirates World, but from everything I've learned, the theming was somewhat thin compared to Six Gun, which had a much more authentic feel. Part of this is down to the fact that the Pirates' unthemed rides were placed throughout the themed areas, creating a discontinuity. Still, I'm sure it was a fun place. It had an impressive Wild Mouse style of roller coaster, something fairly rare in the U.S. today. There was one at Busch Gardens called Sand Serpent, but it was removed in 2023 to make room for a new coaster, and Legoland has one, the Great Lego Race. Pirates also had a steeplechase coaster, and there's none of those left in the U.S. at all. The park closed only 6 years after opening, making it one of the shortest operating attractions in the state. It aptly called itself an amusement center since it falls short of full theme park status. Moving forward in time, we get to 1982 and the opening of Disney's second park, Epcot Center. It used to be common knowledge that Epcot was an acronym for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, though considering the park's immense size, it was often renamed Every Person Comes Out Tired. It opened exactly 11 years after the Magic Kingdom, and it's still Disney's most ambitious achievement. The park is huge, effectively the size of 2 parks, and it's nicely broken up into 2 areas, Future World and World Showcase. At least that's how it was until 2009, when Future World was split into East and West. Then a decade later, Future World morphed into 3 parts, World of Discovery, World of Celebration, and World of Nature. Goodness knows why that was needed, but regardless as to the names, they're all part of Epcot's theme, that of a permanent World's Fair, with World Showcase representing the countries and Future World representing technical innovations. So yes, whether you want to call it Epcot Center or just Epcot, the park is most definitely a theme park. Each ride and show are themed to their areas with the questionable exception of the Frozen Ever After ride. Since the story of Frozen takes place in a fictional kingdom, not Norway. Thank goodness there's not been any controversy about that. At the opening of Epcot, Disney World became the first property in the world to have 2 theme parks, which was a significant milestone. Sadly, just 2 years later, Six Gun Territory closed after 20 years of operation, over 1 million happy guests, and probably 1 million blanks fired. And while Six Gun wasn't really a theme park, the Magic Kingdom and Epcot weren't the only 2 in Florida. While many people wouldn't know it, just 15 miles south of Epcot, there was a 3rd theme park. Opened just 3 years after Magic Kingdom, Circus World was an attraction like no other. Located in Polk County, the Circus World Showcase, an elaborate preview center, opened in '74, while the full park opened less than 2 years later. That marks the first time there were 2 theme parks in the Orlando area. The name makes the theme clear, and its owner was none other than the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, the largest touring circus in the country. By the time Circus World opened, its owners had been in the circus business for over 100 years. Circus World was definitely a theme park, with even the restrooms sticking to the theme. The park was developed like the Magic Kingdom in that a great deal more money was spent on its construction than was spent at either Six Gun or Pirates, including plenty of big and exciting rides. Yes, they're mostly traditional types, but they were scaled up from those seen on midways at county fairs. Its wooden coaster was one of the largest in the country and cost $2.3 million when it opened in 1978. Originally called the Roaring Tiger, it was renamed Michael Jackson's Thrill Coaster because of the superstar's fondness for the ride. It'd be renamed yet again to the Florida Hurricane. Today it's still in operation as the Arkansas Twister at Magic Springs Amusement Park in, you guess it, Arkansas. One other thing, Circus World was unusual as a theme park because the rides weren't really themed. But in this instance, it didn't matter since the circus theme allows for midway-style rides. So basically, its unthemed rides were themed. So far, I've looked at purpose-built theme parks, but how about a theme park that evolves into existence? Take a look at Busch Gardens in Tampa. It opened in 1959 as a garden located next to the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. Within a couple years, it had one attraction, the Stairway to the Stars. This was one of the most unlikely and oddest rides in Florida's history. Built by Otis Elevators, it was an 86-foot or 26-meter tall escalator attached to the side of the brewery, which guided visitors up to the roof to an observation deck and then onto the brewery tour. Throughout the 1960s, Busch Gardens expanded by purchasing land, and by '66 it became a zoological park featuring an elevated monorail, the first one in the state. Later, with a realization that Disney would radically change the nature of tourism, Busch Gardens decided to start adding more rides. This brings us to 1976, the year I semi-arbitrarily picked for its arrival as a theme park, because it's when the park installed Python, its first roller coaster, as well as the monstrous Mamba. Those rides tipped the scale, making it one of 3 theme parks in Florida. Its theme is that of a zoo, primarily with African animals. Today it's one of the largest zoos in the country, and its rides are animal and Africa themed. A typical annual attendance of 4 million people ranks it as the second most visited zoo in the country, though this is also due to it being a theme park. We'll get to number 1 in a bit. Busch Gardens is our oldest theme park, if you ignore that for the first 15 years it wasn't a theme park. On the other hand, there's another attraction that liked to call itself a theme park that's quite a bit older. Named Cypress Gardens, it's located south of Circus World and opened in 1939 as a garden, much like Busch did without the beer. During World War II, they began doing water ski shows for visiting military personnel, and by the 50s it was probably the most popular attraction in the state. Yet by the 80s it was struggling because of the double whammy of being far away from an interstate and Disney taking away so much of the available revenue. In the 90s, it promoted itself as Florida's first theme park. They were welcome to say whatever they wanted, but let's explore this. The first thing to know is that from the 50s through the 90s, the park hardly changed at all. It was a beautiful garden and a popular water ski show. Its theme as laid out here was the charm and hospitality of the Old South. The beautiful local women, clothed in antebellum dress, were as popular with visitors as the water ski shows, but it's pushing it to say that a whitewashed version of the pre-Civil War South is a theme. And then the other part. Cypress Gardens never had many attractions. This map from the 90s shows that it remained mostly gardens, so for me it was never a theme park. While Cypress Gardens was struggling, Circus World was having a similar issue. Once Epcot opened, competition for visitors became fierce. Circus World wasn't able to keep up with just its old school rides, and by 1986 the writing was on the wall. The park closed operations, though at this point it didn't go away. As just 1 year later, the circus was transformed into boardwalk and baseball, yet another of America's most American activities. By the way, both themes made a lot of sense in Florida. For many decades, Sarasota was the winter headquarters of the Ringling Brothers Circus and became a popular seasonal attraction. Likewise, while Florida didn't get a Major League Baseball team until 1993, it hosted spring training as early as 1889, and it has a dramatically unique baseball history. The new theme of the park continued to allow the midway rides by simply going from the circus to the beachfront. So in 1987, Central Florida was back to 4 theme parks. While other parks were struggling, Disney was doing just fine. Epcot struggled a bit due to the early 1980s recession, but when the economy recovered, Disney went on a building spree and built a number of resort hotels and another theme park. Disney MGM Studios opened in 1989. Its theme was that of a functioning movie and TV studio, an idea borrowed, shall we say, from Universal Studios in California. At first, Disney was serious about the production side of the park, but found it all but impossible to get filmmakers to relocate from California. It also had an exceptional studio backlot to which guests headed off each day for a 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour. Now named Hollywood Studios, it's certainly a theme park, and if it's not yet clear, Disney themes everything. 1 year after Disney's Studio Park opened, a remarkably similar park opened 11 miles to the north. It was also based on Universal Studios in Hollywood, and it was named Universal Studios Florida. This is the most controversial episode in Florida's theme park history. The situation of Disney versus Universal and how they built the same type of park at the same time and next door to each other is a story I'll cover eventually. Like Disney's park, Universal had a studio tour and other themed attractions and focused on movie and TV production. It became theme park number 6 in Central Florida. You know, this history feels a little like a roller coaster ride itself, and you might be able to guess what's coming next. The rethemed Circus World opened in 1987 as Boardwalk and Baseball, closed in 1990, never to reopen, giving Florida its first failed theme park. Today, the location is a shopping center. Now, ever play Monopoly? Remember how one person often does so well they're constantly building hotels while other players struggle? Well, just 9 years after Disney MGM Studios opened, they built their 4th theme park, Disney's Animal Kingdom. If Florida theme parks were playing Monopoly, it's at this point where Busch Gardens appears to have landed on Broadway with a hotel owned by Disney. Animal Kingdom's theme is that of a zoo, just like Busch Gardens. And while to me it's not quite at the level of Busch Gardens, it's a great park and it's a lot closer to other Disney parks. For attendance, that's a nearly insurmountable advantage. Animal Kingdom has plenty of themed attractions and features Mount Everest, which somehow gives the impression it's the real mountain even though it's just 200 feet or 61 meters tall. The next decade saw the rivalry between Universal and Disney get intense. While Universal began with a park confusingly similar to a Disney one, they'd finished the 20th century with a second park. Named Islands of Adventure, at first a lot of visitors thought it was an expansion of the studios instead of a separate park. This wasn't too surprising considering the parks share a border. This is especially noticeable during the winter holidays when people go to see the annual Grinchmas musical show. Guests enter the queue through Ioway's Seuss Landing. However, the show is in one of the studio's sound stages that's in the no man's land between the two parks. These sound stages are also home to several of Halloween Horror Nights' houses every year. Opened in 1999, Ioway is similar to the Magic Kingdom in that it has a number of lands with distinct themes. The park currently has 8 lands, including their own version of Main Street called Port of Entry. In its first decade, IOA's most popular areas were Marvel Superhero Island and Jurassic Park, but it's not until 2010 that the Universal Resort began to nip at Disney's heels when it came to attendance. For example, in 2009, IOA's year-long attendance was 4.6 million, ranking it the 7th most popular park in Florida out of 8. Then, in 2010, Universal opened a Harry Potter-themed area. In its first full year, IOA reached 7.6 million people, an additional 3 million guests. This not only got Universal to double down and open up a second Harry Potter area in the studios, it got Disney to wake up and respond. And yes, that's a much bigger story than I can possibly cover here. In 1999, the Magic Kingdom turned 28 and was now just one of 7 theme parks in the area. If you're keeping count, that's a park every 4 years. But we're not done yet. However, we need to head back into the past one more time and take a look at SeaWorld. In 2024, SeaWorld Orlando is celebrating the 60th anniversary of SeaWorld parks around the country, though the Florida location opened 51 years ago. At the time of its start, SeaWorld was a fully fledged aquarium, one that I usually call an oceanarium, since most of its animals are ocean-going mammals. The park had several shows displaying whales, dolphins, walruses, sea lions, and otters, but in its early years it had only one ride, Sky Tower, a 400-foot rotating observation tower which opened in 1974. While SeaWorld added a few things over the years, such as Shark Encounter and Penguin Encounter, I suggest that it didn't reach theme park status until the year 2000, when it got its first coaster. At least that's the year I chose, though it's not like it really matters. Named for a sea monster, Kraken joined 2 earlier thrill rides, Mission Bermuda Triangle, a flight simulator, and Journey to Atlantis, a fancy log flume dark ride. This gave the area 3 zoological theme parks. Today, SeaWorld has fully embraced the theme park concept and has evolved into a coaster park with 6 of them. Currently, SeaWorld and Busch Gardens are owned by the same company, and combined they have a total of 14 coasters, not counting junior versions. To put that into perspective, Disney has 7, while Universal has a total of 6. It's not a terribly important metric, but for many years, a criticism of Florida parks was the limited number of thrill rides compared to more traditional amusement parks. People don't think that way anymore. The region was now getting lousy with theme parks, with the millennium marking the emergence of Central Florida as the vacation capital of the world. However, among all the growth, Cypress Gardens was dropping in attendance and mostly relying on locals for revenue. It filed for bankruptcy in 2006, and in 2009 the park closed, finishing with 70 years of continuous operation, one of the longest in Florida history. For fans, this was a sad day because the Gardens was one of the most beautiful in the state and was the site of a number of spectacular movies in the 50s and 60s. Happily, a new company purchased the property and decided to redevelop it. Merlin Entertainment is a British company, and it's currently ranked 2nd in a list of amusement park companies. By the way, Disney is of course the largest, with Universal ranked 4th and United Parks, the owner of Busch Gardens and SeaWorld, coming in at number 9. But let's get back to Cypress Gardens. Merlin Entertainment decided to do a pretty smart thing. They built a Legoland, a type of theme park that was already popular around the world, and was specifically oriented to families with younger children, something that wasn't that well represented in Central Florida. Happily, they kept their original gardens and continued offering water ski shows. They also added a number of themed rides as well as literally tons of sculptures built out of Legos. And yes, that's the theme of the park. These days, Legoland is considered a success. It doesn't have the attendance numbers of the nearby theme parks, but it has resort hotels and an adjacent water park, something that is almost a requirement for Florida theme parks, as they all have them. On top of that, the park also developed a second park, which opened in 2021. This is Peppa Pig Theme Park, and yes, that's its official name. But is it a theme park, or is this an advertising ploy? It opened in 2021 and is located next to Legoland, so it is a park and has a theme, the animated character Peppa Pig and its friends. It also has some attractions, though there's less than 10. But there's a good reason why there's so few. The park is only 4.5 acres, or under 2 hectares, making it the smallest theme park in Florida by an order of magnitude. And yes, I consider it a theme park. Every attraction is themed, and there's enough there to keep its target audience of preschoolers happy until nap time. That makes 10 theme parks. But now, I'll deal with the asterisk that's on the title image. In 2019, Universal announced that they were building a new park 2 miles or 3 kilometers away and is due to open in May 2025. Named Universal's Epic Universe, because of course, it'll be a theme park along the lines of Universal's other parks with 5 themed areas named Celestial Park, Dark Universe, How to Train Your Dragon, Super Nintendo World, and Universal's third wizarding world of Harry Potter. Remember, Florida's long-held tradition, you never have too much of a good thing. Epic Universe will be Central Florida's 11th currently operating park. While none of the parks release their attendance figures, the Themed Entertainment Association, which represents companies that design and build theme parks, does produce fairly accurate numbers. Our 10 current parks saw about 90 million visitors in a pre-pandemic 2019. While the industry has bounced back from that situation, I still use the 2019 numbers as a benchmark. When Epic Universe's numbers are included, park attendance in Florida will approach the 100 million mark. 8 of the parks are within a few minutes' drive of each other, while the other 3 are close enough that they're regularly visited by the same tourists, as illustrated here. In the comments, please tell me what your favorite park is and if you have memories, especially of the early parks, Six Gun, Pirates World, and Circus World. Any information you can share would be interesting and helpful. Thank you for watching another of my videos. I hope you enjoyed it. If you learned something, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more information on Florida's tourism history. Stingray Tom's Florida, traveling through time around the Sunshine State.